Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, because we are on a Wednesday. Oh my goodness me, the middle of the working week. How did that happen? It only feels like 2 days ago we were starting the working week, and here we are. Anyway, we've had adventures today, which we'll tell you about at halftime. What are we reading? Well, new book-ish. Might have another new book tonight as well, which we'll talk about halftime. But the new book-ish is Ghost Stations 4 by Bruce Barrymore Halpenny. We'll take it as it comes. It's probably going to have really weird kind of grammatical faux pas and goodness knows what else. So anyway, what are we drinking tonight? We are drinking from Lidl the Woodgate Fruit Cider, made in Somerset, which is where we are here. In fact, I will show you some Somerset. There is the view out the window there. And look, there's his derpiness on the windowsill. So he's a bit miffed with me because he's been shut in all day. But hey ho, the back door's open. He can come and go as he please, but he'd rather sit on the windowsill. Anyway, so yes, we're having the Woodgate cider, and part deux of tonight, it will be the Love Lane Brewery Blackbird Extra Stout, 6.7%. What are we washing it down with? We're washing it down with the Highland Earl Special Reserve from Aldi, 40%. So all good stuff. And we've got a new book to talk about half time. So shall we crack on? But before we crack on, before I forget, so Dead Soldier and Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, Dead Soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
So let's have a look and see. Did we do Glenn Miller? No, we won't do Glenn Miller this time. No, God, that one goes on for bloody ages. So we'll do the 4 White Parachutes. Let me just mark the page so we know we've done this one. 4 White Parachutes. While training for aircrew at the Elementary Air Navigation School in Eastbourne, I spent several afternoons playing tennis with a fellow airman, Bert Hawes, in Devonshire Park, said Geoffrey Hall. And that was where it started, on the tennis court at Eastbourne, a wartime factual story that is stranger than fiction. The 4 White Parachutes were to remain fixed in the mind of number 1578210 ex-warrant officer Geoffrey Hall for the duration of the war. The 4 White Parachutes proved to have been a lucky omen. But at the time the young navigator witnessed the incident, he was unsure of the meaning of 4 white parachutes. The answer lay in the future. But let us go back to the beginning. It's got a bit Dylan Thomas here, but let us go back to the beginning. Geoffrey Hall joined the Royal Air Force in March 1942 and began training as an observer. As the war progressed, this trade became navigators. A keen and eager Geoffrey Hall went first to the initial training wing at Torquay in Devon. This station had been a Royal Naval Air Station during the First World War, and home comforts were few and far between, but that did not deter his enthusiasm. Plus it's Devon as well, come on. From Torquay, Sergeant Geoffrey Hall was posted to Brighton for mathematics instruction. After a brief spell there, he was posted to Eastbourne in East Sussex. This station had also been a Royal Naval Air Station during the First World War. Was that the reason for the 4 white parachutes? Had the Navy a part to play in the incident that was yet to unfold? Only time would tell. So, what was the meaning behind the 4 white parachutes, and why only 4? Geoffrey Hall takes up the story. Eastbourne in the spring of 1942 was being given constant attention by tip-and-run raiders, high-speed fighters which sneaked very low across the channel to avoid detection on the radar screens. They would deposit a bomb, shoot at anything that moved, then turn for home before the sirens could scream a warning or anti-aircraft guns brought into action. It was therefore not a great surprise to me when, during the course of a game, I saw 4 white parachutes floating steadily down towards the sea at what seemed to be no more than half a mile's distance. I stopped playing and drew Bert's attention to them, but although perfectly clear to me, drifting before the west wind and finally disappearing below the roof of the hotels on the seafront, he saw absolutely nothing. In fact, he muttered something about my intention of distracting him from his winning streak. So convinced was I that I had seen parachutes that I made inquiries of other airmen, but although some had been drilling on the promenade at the time and others manning a gun position on the beach, no one had seen anything unusual. There had been no raid that afternoon, no gunfire, no sirens, no aircraft engines heard. So what a strange experience for Geoffrey. And what was the meaning of it? I think we'll have a quick swig of the old Woodgate dark fruit cider, if you don't mind, in the magnificent Rush beer glass. I don't know if you can see that. Courtesy of viewers Kirsten and Steve, the United States, Slingsby Bar. Oh, lovely. So many questions, all of which remained unanswered. He could not understand why Bert Hawes had not seen the 4 white parachutes. They were so clear, yet he had not seen them as they floated gently to earth. Why? Geoffrey Hall was very puzzled by it all. Sergeant Bert Hawes, service number 1578211, was also training to be an Royal Air Force observer, and he and Geoffrey Hall had become good friends. A camaraderie bond had grown up between them, having joined at the same time as their service numbers show. The incident of the 4 white parachutes was quickly pushed to the back of Geoffrey's mind as their training continued, and from Eastbourne both he and Bert Hawes were posted to an advanced flying unit at RAF Station Penrhos on the Llyn Peninsula in North Wales, on their next stage of their navigational training. Night flying was carried out from Llanrog, which was an airfield equipped with tarmac runways. They both settled down to their training, and from Penrhos they were both posted to an operational training unit at Abingdon. This was only a brief stay, and from Abingdon their paths separated. Sergeant Bert Hawes went on to join a Lancaster squadron, while Sergeant Geoffrey Hall went on to an operational training unit at Wellesbourne, a posting which was due to an administrative mix-up. Unbeknown to Geoffrey Hall, the mix-up was a planned route of the future, and he was on the correct path, which would lead to the 4 white parachutes. I'm intrigued. At the operational training unit at RAF Wellesbourne, Sergeant Geoffrey Hall had been moulded into an RAF bomber crew. He was now part of a team, and he could not help feeling sad that his good friend, Bert Hawes, was not part of that team. But that was not possible, for there was only one navigator to each bomber crew, and they were both in the same trade. Sergeant Hall was part of a twin-engined Vickers Wellington bomber crew, which had a total of five crew members. Doesn't need the comma there. Oh. They were Sergeants Tomin, pilot; Hall, navigator; Johnson, wireless operator; Simmons, bomb aimer; and Ostafikuik, the rear gunner. A crew of 5. And an Avro Lancaster bomber had a crew of 7, so that did not explain the 4 white parachutes. For Sergeant Geoffrey Hall, they were still a mystery that he could not help thinking about from time to time. Night flying was carried out from Gaydon. Then at long last they were ready for battle, and in April 1943, Geoffrey Hall and his crew were posted to number 427 Lion Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, at Royal Air Force Croft in County Durham. This was an operational bomber station, and within days they were allocated Wellington X HE 547. On the night of the 16th to 17th of April 1943, they set out to bomb the AG Farben industry at Ludwigshafen in Germany. But it was to be their one and only operational sortie, for they were destined not to return. At least the meaning of the 4 white parachutes would be made clear to Geoffrey Hall. Or would it? Over the target, the Wellington bomber came under heavy and sustained fire. Suddenly, the bomber gave a violent lurch to the port. Suddenly the bomber gave a violent lurch and the port engine ceased. Remaining calm, the pilot fought to control the bomber, but it was useless, and the pilot ordered the crew members to leave the crippled bomber. I'd have written crippled aircraft, but never mind. At that point, it all suddenly became very clear to Geoffrey Hall. The 4 white parachutes. He seemed oblivious of what was going on all around him as his mind went back to the spring of 1942 and the tennis match at Eastbourne. Now a year later, it was being played out for real over the night sky of hostile Germany. The meaning of the 4 white parachutes was now clear to Geoffrey Hall, as he recalls. I was not to know that exactly 1 year later I would be one of 4 in a bomber crew parachuting to captivity over Germany from a crippled bomber. Was this a preview of that distant event? There were 5 men in our Wellington crew, but our pilot elected to remain at the controls of the crippled bomber so that his crew had a chance to leave. Therefore, only 4 parachutes. The 4 white parachutes that he had seen so clearly 1 year earlier, yet his friend Bert Hawes had not seen them. Was it because he was not in the crew? Geoffrey Hall parachuted to safety and was taken prisoner. He spent the next 2 years in prisoner of war camps, Dulag Luft Oberrussel, Stalag Luft 3, Sagen, Stalag Luft 6, Heiderdruck, Stalag 357, Thorn, and Stalag 375, Fallingbostel. Yet, despite all the moves, he managed to keep a diary, and the following is an extract from his war diary for the night he was shot down. Extract from Geoffrey Hall's war diary. Slouch. 16th to 17th of April. Much has happened since the 13th. On the afternoon of the 16th, we were briefed to attack the AG Farben industry on the banks of the Rhine at Ludwigshafen. We took off at dusk and headed southeast, climbing on course. My last glimpse of England was the fading grey arm of Flamborough ahead. We passed uneventfully through the French coastal barrage, and soon after that, the Guy set became useless, the Germans jamming it with waving streamers of grass. From then on, the navigation was dead reckoning only. Bill started us once, be-giving, I think he means by-giving, by giving a night fighter false alarm and firing his guns at the planet Jupiter. Then it was a tedious but suspenseful journey. We saw flak going up in streams in the moonlit haze many miles to starboard, and I thought it might be Saarbrücken. Soon after that, we were approaching the target, and the first Pathfinder marker flares were going down. Because of inexperience, we made a mess of our first bombing run and went round and tried again. The bombs went, but we were held in a powerful blue searchlight. I heard Bill shouting over the intercom, "Get weaving, skipper, for Christ's sake!" There was a dull thump like someone hitting a wall with a sandbag, and the port engine stopped dead. The Wimpy lurched, hung in the sky for a moment, then dropped like a stone. She went down so fast that I was forced from my seat and hung suspended in the air for a few seconds. Floating near my nose were my dividers, ruler, and pencil. Through the headphones, I could hear the crew shouting. Through the headphones, I could hear the crew shouting. Bill's voice above the rest. "We gotta get out. She's going down." Then the aircraft must have righted itself, because I suddenly hit the floor violently and was immediately very sick. I heard Steve asking for a course to steer, and collecting my charts together, gave him a direction pointing to the nearest part of France. By this time, the starboard engine was making a noise like an old lawnmower, and we were not doing much more than gliding west. It was obvious we would never make it to the French border. However, we had bombed from 21,000 feet, and despite our loss of altitude during the stall, we were still at a considerable height. While Steve held the Wimpy in a steep glide, Albert and Tony worked at the balance cocks, which changed our fuel tanks over. They wondered whether the engines were starved of petrol by fuel lines being cut, but it was useless, and presently Steve, probably thinking he couldn't hold the Wimpy much longer, gave the order to bail out. I clipped my chute onto the two harness rings on my chest, pressed the button to blow up the still secret G-set, and made my way forward to the front escape hatch. Only an hour or two ago, I had entered the hatch so confidently, with the navigation officer saying, "Good luck, see you at breakfast." No chance of that now. Bill swung his turret and dropped out backwards. Tony and Albert went out of the front hatch, and I looked down. The moonlight picked out a great river in the black landscape. Steve, holding the plane steady, jerked his thumb down, and the next moment I was gone. The black shape of the aircraft was silhouetted for a second against the silver backcloth of the clouds. Then it too disappeared. And Geoffrey had plenty of time to think about the 4 white parachutes, as he explains. During the 2 years I was prisoner, I often thought about the incident and wondered whether Bert Hawes had survived the war. When I returned to England, I learned that he had joined a squadron, but had been killed a month before I had been shot down. I wondered if that explained why he had been unable to see the 4 white parachutes. They were a vision of an event which was to occur after his death. Geoffrey Hall retired from the Royal Air Force in February 1946 with the rank of warrant officer, and as the years pass, the incident of the 4 white parachutes remains clear in his mind. Nothing else has ever happened like it, and he cannot understand why only he should glimpse a page of his life. Sorry, it's because I was thrown again by Bruce putting a bloody comma after an and. Nothing else has ever happened like it, and he cannot explain. Doesn't need a comma, and he cannot explain why only he should glimpse a page of his life. And he says, whether, of course, this was a genuine case of foreknowledge can never be proved, although I am convinced it was. I think that definitely deserves a thunderclap. So. We definitely haven't read that one before, so I don't think we've read the Glenn Miller chapter either. But anyway, what are we up to? 20 minutes. Goodness me. Slange me by everybody. And we are going to have a bit of the old Highland Earl. And we got some fan mail. Let's just read the fan mail. Oh, I can't read that out. That's I can't read that out. That's absolutely filthy. Anyway, Ghost Rider of Nut Hampstead. In 1984, Adam Gurney went to look over the old Nut Hampstead airfield with an old school friend. Both were great aviation enthusiasts and spent much time at air shows and visiting old airfields. It was just around dusk when they drove onto the old runway and started to look around. The beer burps at 21 minutes and 44 seconds. There we go. That's early tonight. Some 20 minutes later, Adam suddenly felt compelled to look in his rear-view mirror. He was mesmerized at the sight of a ghost-like rider on a horse some distance behind, racing towards them at full gallop. He nudged his friend, who turned and glanced at the approaching Ghost Rider, then hurriedly locked all the car doors, then drove quickly away from the oncoming Ghost Rider. The old airfield was now only a ghost airfield, with only a few remaining buildings, perimeter track and section of runway, the latter being split by a small area of trees. The sections of runway were in very poor condition, thus greatly hampering the getaway of Adam and his friend. After some minutes at high speed, Adam realized the bad runway surface was not doing his car any good, and at the opportune moment, drove around the clump of trees and turned off the car engine and lights in an attempt, now it was dark, to shake off the pursuer. Actual proper use of a comma there with an and at the opportune moment, and drove around the clump of trees. That's why you have commas. Anyway, after a few moments, with no sign of the galloping horseman rounding the end of the tree line, Adam started the engine and retraced his route. The car headlights lit up the whole runway for quite some distance. There was no sign of the galloping horseman. The Ghost Rider had vanished. Where to? As the only possible ways that the galloping horseman could have gone were around the trees from the other end, in which case he would have been head on to the car, or across the open airfield towards the village, once again putting him in plain view of the car occupants as it emerged from near the clump of trees. Again. As the only possible ways that the galloping horseman could have gone were around the trees from the far end, in which case he would have been head on to the car, or across the open airfield towards the village, once again putting him in plain view of the car occupants as it emerged from near the clump of trees. The only other route for the galloping horseman was back the way it had come, that being towards the woods at the far end of the airfield. But here again, he would have been spotted by Adam and his friend before he reached cover. Unless, of course, he was a Ghost Rider. So what was the connection? So what connection does an old wartime airfield have with a Ghost Rider? To try and find the answer, we must go back to the beginning. Construction of the airfield began in 1942, and it was constructed by the American Army as a standard bomber airfield for the American 8th Air Force. It was sited near and named after the village of Nut Hampstead. Most of the airfield was built in the Scales Park on land that was owned by Baron Dimsdale, and was an area renowned for horse riding. Was this the connection with the Ghost Rider? He's done it again. And, comma, was an area renowned for horse riding. And was an area renowned for horse riding. It doesn't need the comma, Bruce. What do you do on Wednesday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, but instead a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head was giving us a bloody English lesson. So, anyway. Was this the connection with the Ghost Rider? It could well be, for it was said at the time a horsewoman rode out daily to watch the building of the airfield, which she was against. Which comma she was against. Doesn't need the comma, Bruce. Before the airfield was completed in May 1943, the mystery horsewoman had vanished. The airfield consumed some 365 acres of land, which was of natural beauty. He's done it again. Which comma was of natural beauty. Which was of natural beauty. The technical site was situated just west of the airfield near Nut Hampstead village. The bomb dump was on the south side. 2 T2 hangars were erected, plus the usual living sites, which consisted of Nissen huts. Errant comma. The first 8th Air Force unit to use the airfield was the 55th Fighter Group, and they remained until April 1944. And they remained until 1944. They were replaced by the 398th Bomb Group, which flew 195 missions from Nut Hampstead. By then, the war was over. Nut Hampstead finally closed in 1959. Much of the runways and perimeter track were broken up and the hardcore used to build the M1 motorway. I think I'll have another quick swig of the old cider dirt. Oh, lovely. Slange. In 1988, Miss Kerry Lee Parish, also a great aviation enthusiast and interested in the histories of the old wartime airfields. See, I know you're going to shout at me and say, stop doing this, JM, but in 1988, Miss Kerry Lee Parish, also a great aviation enthusiast and, interested in the histories of the airfields, met Adam Gurney and, during conversation about the old airfields, told her of his encounter with the Ghost Rider at Nut Hampstead Airfield. Right. The reason why we put a comma in is, let's read that so the comma breaks up the sentence. So, in 1988, Miss Kerry Lee Parish, also an aviation enthusiast, and met Adam Gurney. That's what happens when you put a comma in the wrong place. It doesn't make grammatical sense. So it should be, in 1988, Miss Kerry Lee Parish, also a great aviation enthusiast and, no comma, interested in the histories of the wartime airfields, met Adam Gurney and, during conversation about the old airfields, told her of his encounter with the Ghost Rider at Old Nut Hampstead Airfield. I do apologise. Well, I'm not apologising for him. I'm apologising for me constantly picking up his shocking, poor use of grammar. Anyway, when told the story, she said, finding it rather hard to believe, I asked him to take me to the airfield. He was very apprehensive, but I eventually persuaded him when we set out one autumn day in 1989. We found the airfield with some difficulty, and again it was nearing dusk. We drove onto the airfield and stopped the car so that he could point out the places relevant to the story. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. There was not a sound anywhere on the airfield. In fact, it was unnaturally quiet. The other thing was that I felt totally uneasy and cold. We locked the car doors and drove slowly around the line of trees. As no horsemen appeared, we got gradually more adventurous. I bet they did. And found an old track running parallel to the runway we had just left. We drove along this, finding it just wide enough for the car. About level with the end of the trees, the track curved into an area resembling a dispersal, and, as we could go no further, we turned around and were just about to drive back when the headlights of the car reflected off what appeared to be a puddle of about 4 feet in diameter. We pulled up next to the puddle, and on closer examination from the car window, we discovered that it wasn't water, but blood we were looking at. My boyfriend suggested that it may have been left by poachers, but the blood was very fresh and still wet. Also, it was too large to have been caused by a poacher resting his kill. The blood was also completely unblemished by animal remains such as fur or hair. Yet again, a hasty retreat was beaten. So, no sign of the Ghost Rider, only a pool of fresh blood. Was it the blood from the Ghost Rider? When asked, Adam said, the horse and rider looked totally solid and normal in appearance. There was nothing ghostly about them. It was the way it felt. In the fading light of dusk, the rider of the horse was basically just a silhouette, and the details of the rider's clothes were indistinguishable, errant comma. On sighting the horse and rider, my overriding feeling was one of intense fear. So, the Ghost Rider could have been either a man or a woman. Was it the woman who was seen in the area at the time the airfield was being built? But what about the pool of blood? How does that fit into the picture of the Ghost Rider? Had the Ghost Rider been wounded? When I asked Kerry Lee about the blood, she said, the blood was sighted on the edge of a perimeter track leading to a panhandle dispersal at the southern side of the airfield. The blood looked real in every respect and was a vivid red. And she added, upon recollection, the fact that the blood had not soaked into the grass at the edge of the perimeter track was very unusual. And when asked how they felt about Nut Hampstead Airfield, Kerry Lee replied, on his subsequent return to the airfield with me, Adam was apprehensive and on edge all the time. When the blood was sighted, all he wanted to do was leave immediately. My own recollection is of an intense feeling of cold fear, and I felt extremely uncomfortable and nervous. Of many airfields containing control towers, old accommodation and technical buildings we have had, of many airfields containing control towers, old accommodation and technical buildings we have had. Let's try that again. That's a shocking reading. It's because Bruce puts the commas in the wrong place. So, Slange, you good help. Of many airfields containing control towers, old accommodation and technical buildings, we have had the feeling of not being alone. There is also an overwhelming quietness which shrouds old airfields. However, Nut Hampstead is the only airfield which puts us both ill at ease, and it gives you an impression of there being something wrong every time you visit. Maybe that was the purpose of the Ghost Rider, to keep people away, and the blood was the second warning from the Ghost Rider of Nut Hampstead. Now all I can hear is the Rush song Ghost Rider from their 2002 album Vapor Trails, which in my mind is still relatively fresh in the memory. 24 years ago. Oh my goodness me. If I think back to Vapor Trails and kind of go back 24 years, so 2002, 1992, 1982, 24 years ago, so that would be 90s. So that's the equivalent of Permanent Waves onto Vapor Trails. I can't fathom time as a distance. Anyway, what are we up to? 34 minutes. We're at half time, folks. Hurrah! Right, what are we going to break open here? Because we've bought some snacks. What have we got here? We've got the full gamut. We've got the wasabi. We've got the Japanese. Yeah, we'll go for the wasabi rice snack. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologise. Right. Time. If I can open the wasabi rice snacks. So what did we do today? Reg and I, we had a 2-reg walk down on the West Somerset Railway, and I will bring up the pictures in a second. Bear with. So here we go. This is today's 2-reg trip. We went down on the West Somerset Railway, as is our wont, and we did, it's a walk we've done before. Anyway, so there we go. There is Sir Reginald on the train. When we drove down the M5, it did start to rain briefly. By the time we got down to Bishop's Lydeard, brilliant sunshine all day, quite warm as well, very nice. Although I've got to say, a slight element and feeling that we've seen the hottest days now. It does feel like summer is on the wane. I hate to say it, but yeah. So there we go. There's Reg on the train. So we got off at Washford and walked from Washford to Watchet. So these are all out of sequence now. This is annoying. That's like a little house in Watchet, which is covered in Somerset griffins. I think they're griffins. That's the pumping station at Watchet, Stoats Mill, the Vortex turbine. Absolutely brilliant stuff. That was one of the locomotives that came into Watchet. This is a book which I will tell you about in a moment. Pick that up in the community bookshop. Absolutely brilliant. May form the basis of a Sunday night ghost stories extra or whatnot. That was the Odney Manor, which was one of the other locomotives that came in. This is the view from the train of the Bristol Channel. More Bristol Channel. We can walk. You can see people walking in the distance. We've walked this many times. It's absolutely brilliant. And there is myself and Reginald on the train. That was one of the flower displays at Watchet Station, I do declare. No, that was Minehead High Street. And that was a bee getting stuck in. That was lunch. It was very nice. It was my shout this week. So that was a very nice salad and with some coleslaw. There's Reg getting stuck into his sausage roll at Blenheim Park, just off Minehead High Street. That was when Reg went off to do some shopping. I finished off the tea and had 2 Biscoff biscuits, the complimentary Biscoff biscuits. And that's us on the return leg. Well, actually, that was us when we got the train from Watchet into Minehead. Then on the return leg, I had a cream tea. So here I'm hedging my bets. On the left, it's cream first and jam, which is the Cornish method of doing things. And then on the wrong way of doing things. And then on the right is jam first and then clotted cream, which is the correct way of doing things. And that's the Somerset method of doing things. So anyway, and there's me with my brilliant new hat that I ordered during the week. And then when we got back to Clevedon, took some photographs down the seafront. This looks good. Fish and Chip Fridays at Clevedon Pier. I might even go for that. That looks good fun. And there's Clevedon Pier. Oh my goodness me, that is local to me. That is just. Every time I see Clevedon Pier, I count my blessings that. Yeah, imagine having that on your doorstep. Oh no, that was from the week before, actually. No, that's it. That's Field Bindweed. No, that's from the week before. So that was the 2 Reg walk today. It was about 3 miles from Washford to Watchet, all the W's, but absolutely brilliant. It's Reg's shout next time. So this book I picked up in the community bookshop, Legends of Exmoor by Jack Hurley. Absolutely brilliant. We will be reading this because all the stories are beautifully short. Not necessarily ghost stories, but they are legends, so they are slightly quirky. There are ghosts in it, actually. So I cannot wait to read that one. You know what? Might keep that one for when we actually get into the autumn. So that was today's adventure. So But we did have rain during the night, which was most unusual. In fact, when I went out to the car this morning, because I had to pop down to the shops to get some beer for tonight before picking Reg up, everything had a glorious earthy smell, and I haven't had that for about 6 weeks. So that was quite nice. But anyway. Right. Let's dive on, shall we? Have we got anything else to tell you about tonight? As a think. No, can't think. Echo dispersal at Royal Air Force Scampton. Over the years, there have been many unaccountable stories emanating from people who have served at Royal Air Force Scampton. Many of the ghostly stories have been reported, but for obvious reasons, records are not available and all such stories are dismissed as poppycock. But can so many people, high-ranking people, be wrong? How many ghostly stories and unexplained incidents are unrecorded for fear of being called foolish? It is only when a person cracks does news leak out, but by then the report has been doctored and the supernatural side of the story removed. So, these stories leave doubt, but the eyewitness ones must surely give one food for thought. And there have been many first-hand eerie stories about Royal Air Force Scampton. In Ghost Stations, one will recall the ghost of RAF Scampton chapter, then in Ghost Stations 3, the Jinxed Jets chapter, and the Moor chapter with update of the ghost of RAF Scampton. Again, a silent black Labrador has been sighted many times, only to vanish when approached. So, is RAF Scampton haunted? Many people think so simply because so many strange and unexplainable events have happened at RAF Scampton. Take the case of Corporal Upton. No. Oh, lovely. In June 1974, Corporal Upton arrived at Royal Air Force Scampton with 8127 Air Dog Connie, and it was not long before he heard the stories doing the rounds about the airfield being haunted. But they were just stories to frighten newcomers. What were they? Corporal Upton was a newcomer, all right. He had just completed his training at RAF Debden and qualified as an RAF police dog handler. RAF Scampton was his first posting, a haunting experience he cannot forget. Corporal Upton was not a person to be influenced by ghost stories and was well aware of service life and service pranks. He had made up his mind to join the Royal Air Force at an early age and for about 5 years had served with the rank of Flight Sergeant in 1600 Squadron Air Training Corps in Birmingham. And it could have been because he was an ex-air cadet that he fell foul of the corporal who detailed the shift roster, as Corporal Upton explains. Or I must have been out of favour with the shift corporal because he put me on echo dispersal, which we used to call it the punishment dispersal. There were several stories of weird and strange things happening, and they were all associated with echo dispersal. Echo dispersal at RAF Scampton is one of the nearest to the hangars, and on the night that Corporal Upton was detailed to patrol echo dispersal, there were 4 Vulcan bombers parked on it. Another errant bloody comma here after an and. Never mind. The dispersal area was surrounded by a ring of sodium lights pointing outwards and, the RAF police dog handler patrolled in the middle so that they could not be seen. Corporal Upton and his dog took up patrol on echo dispersal. What happened next, he explains in his own words. Keep you in suspense. Oh, it's nice. On this night, there was no wind. There was a light ground mist, and with the sodium lights, this gave a very weird effect. A movement in the direction of the hangars caught my eye. It was either a dog at a distance or a cat a lot nearer. It was hard to tell distance in the artificial light. I remained perfectly still, glancing at my dog, but it was obvious he had not picked up anything and gave no signs of anything amiss. I glanced back towards the hangars. At that moment, I realized I was looking directly at the spot where Racial Slur's grave is at the side of the Perry track between the hangars and Echo Dispersal. Had Corporal Upton seen Racial Slur's ghost? Once again, a black Labrador seen at RAF Scampton, only to vanish into thin air. Was it a ghost dog? Corporal Upton was certainly not the kind of person to invent such a story. He had nothing to gain from doing so. Indeed, at the time, he had no knowledge of ghost dogs. It was only after reading one of my books, Ghost Stations 3, did the ghostly encounter that September night in 1974 become clear. As he explains, on reading your story about RAF Scampton and the possible sighting of Guy Gibson's dog, Racial Slur, I decided to write and tell you of my incident. I decided to write and tell you of the incident that was brought to mind. In June 1974, I completed my training as an RAF police dog handler and was posted to RAF Scampton as B8106785 Corporal Upton. That is where we came in. So, another eyewitness account of a black Labrador that suddenly vanished. In this case, it was seen by the human eye, but not by the canine guard. Why? Could it be that Racial Slur's ghost is not a troubled spirit, therefore the guard dog's sixth sense did not pick it up, for he had nothing to fear? But it is not just phantom dogs that are seen at RAF Scampton. A few nights after the unexplained encounter, Corporal Upton was on Foxtrot Dispersal, which was a short distance from Echo Dispersal. Suddenly, over the radio came a message from the dog handler on Echo Dispersal to the control, saying he could see an object hovering above him. Upton takes up the story. As I was the closest man to him, I radio up to say I could see and hear nothing. But his messages became more insistent, so a mobile was sent to investigate. Nothing was seen, but the dog handler was extremely nervous and did not want to go out in the dark again. So, why had the police dog handler suddenly gone to pieces on Echo Dispersal? That no one can or will answer, and no one was prepared to discuss the haunted Echo Dispersal, its secret safely covered by the Official Secrets Act. I think that definitely does deserve it's again, Bruce kind of takes elements of an interesting story, embellishes it, but doesn't kind of conclude it. It's just anyway, there we go. Oh, press the wrong button. We're looking for the thunderclap. That's what we're right. Love Lane Brewery. Here we go. 6.7%. Goodness me. Trying to open that without cracking one of my nails. I'm trying to grow my nails. Well, I try not to bite my nails, which I used to do horribly. So when I was on holiday 3 years ago in Southmead Intensive Care Unit, I stopped biting my nails for a while. So the ones on this hand I want to grow because those are my guitar picking fingers. The ones on this hand, I'm quite happy to clip them because, if you pardon the expression, those are my fingering fingers. Those are the ones I fret with. But because I'm right-handed, because everything I handle and doing garden tasks and everything with my right hand, the nails break and fracture. My left hand, which I really don't use for that much, apart from the keyboard and occasional bits and pieces, the nails are growing beautifully. So when I was on the train today, I filed them all down again, and yeah, these are the ones I need to grow. I have been reinforcing them with clear varnish. I do clean them, I do scrub them daily, but I always have some kind of calcium deficiency or so. I do take magnesium supplements and whatnot, but anyway. What do you do on Wednesday night? I don't know. I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, and a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head was banging on about his bloody magnesium deficiency. Let's have some more snacks, shall we? Derp is on the windowsill glaring at me. Right. I'll read you a bit of blur while I'm waiting for the Blackbird Extra Stout to settle in the glass here. Brewed under the watchful eyes of the liver birds, roasted barley, flaked oats, and a selection of dark malts are combined to create a robust dark stout with notes of coffee, rich toffee, and chocolate, finished with a lingering tannic bitterness. A special release from Love Lane. So malts are Golden Promise, Crystal, Oats, Wheat, Chocolate, Black, hops, Admiral, Nose, Chocolate, Rich Toffee, Palate, Creamy, Coffee Sweetness, Finish, Tannic Bitter. UK units 2.9, IBU 550, 6.7%. Oh my goodness me. It's fairly substantial stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, we'll top up the shot element as well. Right, let's crack on. The ghost stories. The hauntings at Royal Air Force Debden. When I interviewed ex-Corporal Upton, here he is. There he is. Look, there's ex-Corporal Upton with his dog. Corporal Upton poses with his dog during his off-duty period. Time to take 10 minutes and look over in daylight the haunted echo dispersal. Even in daylight, the area had a strange and eerie feeling, said Corporal Upton. Actually, we've got some more pictures of Corporal Upton here. Corporal Stephen Upton with his police dog, seen here showing the unique bond of duty between handler and his dog. There he is on his bicycle. And here we have Corporal Stephen Upton with Air Dog Sabre on duty at RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus in 1978. There we go. Actually, we'll do this one here as well. An Avro Lancaster bomber crashes at Royal Air Force Scampton, a typical wartime scene where bombers either crashed on takeoff or on landing due to battle damage. Many times the bombs were still on board at time of impact. So many were killed in this manner, and in this photograph, one exploded where today is Echo Dispersal, the scene of so many hauntings. Is that the reason for the hauntings? Picture there. Right. The hauntings at RAF Debden. When I interviewed ex-Corporal Upton regarding the RAF Scampton incidents, I naturally asked him if he had experienced any other unexplainable events on any other RAF stations. I can recall others, but they are hearsay, he said. He then went on to say, but there is another I can give you firsthand. When I was at RAF Debden in 73-74, it was during the oil crisis. I was made the energy orderly for the barrack blocks. 2 out of every 3 light bulbs had been removed, and my job was to go round last thing every night and switch off the remainder. So I was always last to bed. One night I had just got into bed and I was looking across the room in the direction of a friend who was asleep, when all of a sudden he jumped up screaming. When he had calmed down, he said he had seen an airman leaning over him. The whole barrack block was by this time awake, and several others also said they had seen an airman on several occasions wandering round the billet late at night. Although I was looking directly at Bob when he jumped up, I saw no one there. The next day I went to the guard room to find why someone was patrolling our billet in the middle of the night. I was told that at no time had anyone been there. They just did not do that. RAF Debden in Essex had been an important airfield during the Second World War and had played a major role in the Battle of Britain. It was attacked many times by the Luftwaffe. The airfield was transferred to the United States Army Air Force in September 1942. In the rundown period after the war, Debden had a training role and in 1960 became the Royal Air Force Police Depot until closure of the station in April 1975. During his period at Debden, Steve Upton tried to solve some of the mysteries. The old wartime airfield certainly had an air of uneasy feeling about it, a feeling that one should not be there, as Upton explained. Debden still showed signs of war damage. Bullet holes in many walls were commonplace. I was told that the Women's Royal Air Force block had been hit and quite a few RAFs killed. The block had not been rebuilt because whenever builders started work on it, tools would just... The block had not been rebuilt because whenever builders started work on it, tools just disappeared and various other things happened to make them abandon the job. That was why one of the H blocks was incomplete. So Debden joins the long list of haunted airfields. Did the wartime propaganda machine smooth over the cracks? It is a fact that Debden Airfield came under heavy attack in August 1940. And a great deal of damage was done. Many buildings were destroyed, and in one attack, 5 people were listed as killed. But was there more? I definitely deserve that. Right, we're going to skip the Guy Gibson mystery because I get the horrible... Oh, actually, are we? Yeah, we are. Yeah, we'll jump on to the most haunted airfield, Royal Air Force Leeming. Oh, the Love Lane Brewery. Oops, Daisy. Right, here we go. For the second time tonight, we have a dead soldier. And Run BT...
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Just love Nigel Patrick. What a great actor. Actually in the film Battle of Britain. So there we go. Oh, that's lovely. Slide. We have just gone through the hour mark. So let's crack on, shall we? We're not reading the Guy Gibson mystery. The most haunted airfield, Royal Air Force Leeming. In 1955, Peter Hindley joined the Royal Air Force as an apprentice airframe fitter and was sent to RAF Halton for his training. He duly completed his training, and at the end of 1960, Junior Technician Hindley was posted to RAF Leeming in Yorkshire. RAF Leeming opened in 1940 as a bomber airfield in Bomber Command, and it housed the Armstrong Whitworth Whitley bombers of No. 10 Squadron. As the pace of war increased, the squadron converted to Handley Page Halifax bombers. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologise. Again, look, I've got to show you this. Look, he's done it again. I can't even see that. And comma, it housed. Doesn't need the comma. And it housed the Whitley bombers, No. 10 Squad. It doesn't need the comma. What do you do on Wednesday night? Honestly. In January 1943, the airfield became No. 63 Royal Canadian Air Force Base and comma, remained with the Canadians for the duration of the war. Doesn't need the comma, Bruce. After hostilities ceased, the airfield was spared and it remained open. Its peacetime role being as a training airfield for No. 13 Operational Training Unit. During 1956, runway repairs were carried out in order to bring the airfield up to readiness for the new Gloucester Javelin fighters, which were about to enter RAF service. These were then joined by the Gloucester Meteor NF-14s, and it was during the Meteor Canberra period when junior technician Peter Hindley arrived at RAF Leeming. He takes up the story. As a newcomer to the Operational Conversion Unit servicing Meteor NF-14s and Canberra T-10s, it was my first task on the night shift to which I was allocated. So one of the first tasks on the night shift to which I was allocated was to lock up the hangars after everyone had finished work, usually about 0100 hours. There were two hangars, one where all the unserviceable aircraft were housed, where all the servicing and maintenance was carried out, and at the second hangar, where all the serviceable aircraft were housed ready for flying the next day. It was this second hangar, which I believe is No. 4 hangar on the airfield, that features in the experience. Quick swig of the old beer. Science. Oh, lovely. Oh, lovely. On the second night of my locking up duty, having already secured the serviceable aircraft hangar, I was walking round inside the other hangar. It was quite dark, as only the security lights in the roof were lit. I was checking the internal doors were locked. There was only one door to the outside, which was unlocked, the one I entered by. I suddenly came face to face with an RAF officer who I didn't recognize. This wasn't unusual, as I'd only been there a couple of weeks. He was in flying kit and bid me good night as he passed by. I replied, and he disappeared into the gloom and parked aircraft. I completed my checks, locked the last door, and after walking round the outside of the hangar to check again, handed the keys into the guard room. I returned to the billet, but couldn't get to sleep. I began to think about my meeting earlier. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Where had this officer come from? All doors were locked, and the aircrew rest room was in the other hangar, which was locked. Where did the officer go? I presumed out of the unlocked door, but I didn't hear it open or close. It had a stiff mechanism and made quite a noise when it moved. It was also very heavy and difficult to close and open. Finally, there was something about the man himself which didn't seem right. What it was eluded me. Junior Technician Hindley was very puzzled. Something was just not right, yet he could not figure out what it was. It was eating at him all the next day. The following evening, he went on duty at 1700 hours, and he was soon telling the others on his shift about his eerie encounter in number 4 hangar. I related the previous night's experience to my colleagues in the rest room, said Peter. They said that many lads had had similar experiences, but had refrained from telling me in case it was thought prompted. They then explained my eerie encounter. It appeared that towards the end of the war, a Bristol Beaufighter had crashed into that hangar, killing both pilot and navigator. It was the pilot who walked the airfield and hangar looking for his mate. It then, lowercase I, come on, Bruce, proofread your book better. It then dawned on me why it didn't seem right. He had been wearing a leather flying helmet. He had been wearing a leather flying jacket and had been carrying a leather It then dawned on me why it didn't seem quite right. He had been wearing a leather flying jacket and had been carrying a leather flying helmet. Our pilots all wore bone dome helmets. I also thought at the time how silently the man had moved. I did many more security patrols, but this never happened again. But it did to many others after me. Royal Air Force Leeming is the most haunted airfield. RAF Scampton is a very close second. So many people have reported numerous ghostly sightings and eerie happenings at RAF Leeming. It has to be top of the ghost list. Goodness me, I thought this had finished here, but we've still got another page. Derb's nodding. He's just like, goodness me. Right. That's some more wasabi snacks, I think. In Ghost Stations, we have the chapter The Ghosts of RAF Leeming, and that chapter goes into the background history of the airfield in much more detail, hence the reason I have not done so again here. From the Ghost Stations chapter, one can understand a little about the wartime sadness and sorrow at Royal Air Force Leeming. I did say that RAF Leeming is an excellent example of a wartime bomber airfield complete with phantom aircrews, and that certainly seems to be the case from the vast amount of letters I get about haunted Leeming. During the building of the new hardened aircraft shelters, as shown in the photograph, which were in the news during the Gulf War, for they are the same type of hardened aircraft shelters which Iraq has, two workmen at Leeming suddenly heard voices, yet they could not see anybody, and it was all open around them. As the two workmen looked in the direction of the voices, a sort of ground mist suddenly started to move towards them. They both felt unable to move as they gazed with wide open eyes at the mist which had suddenly appeared. Then out of the mist came two airmen and moved in the direction of the hardened aircraft hangar that was nearing completion. But before the two phantom aircrew reached it, they suddenly vanished. I'll read that again. Yeah, that's fine. But before the two phantom aircrew reached it, they suddenly vanished. No mist, no ghostly figures, only eerie silence. For a few seconds there was an eerie silence, then all of a sudden it was back to normal, said one of the workmen, and the other added, it was just like opening a door, and it was as if we had stepped into another world. When I looked at the two phantoms, which looked like wartime aircrew, like you see in the war films, I was totally oblivious to anything going on around me. During the rebuilding program, many people reported similar encounters with phantom aircrew. So many, in fact, RAF Leeming must surely be the most haunted airfield. It is a fact that many sightings only came about during the building of the hardened aircraft shelters. Was that the reason for the ghostly visit? And it did not stop once the shelters were completed. Many aircrew said that they felt as if they were being watched, and that sometimes it will suddenly get very cold for no reason. RAF Leeming is an active airfield. So many of the ghostly encounters get suppressed. Even so, it is still a very haunted airfield. In fact, the most haunted airfield. I think we're going to rustle on to the end of the show. What are we up to? Hour and 13 minutes. Yeah. Scientific Library. Oh, lovely. In the magnificent, try again, in the magnificent United Federation of Planet Shotgrass, courtesy of friends Kirsten and Steve in the United States. God bless you. Make it so. Right, I'm just going to get the bookmark out of this book because we've read that one. Just having a look to see if there are any short ones. Yeah, there are a couple of short ones that we can finish off tonight. So, Sid Twining, I presume. Let us follow the service career of Peter Hindley, for although nothing further happened at RAF Leeming, another strange incident was yet to unfurl. From RAF Leeming, Junior Technician Hindley was posted to Royal Air Force Geilenkirchen in Germany, to Number 3 Squadron, who were equipped with the English Electric Canberra bombers. Oh, the beer burps again, do apologise. Their role was as a light bomber, night intruder squadron. In 1965, Hindley was posted back to England to RAF Watton in Norfolk. He was selected to work on the Special Installations flight, which involved installing special electronic intelligence equipment into various aircraft. Hindley remained at RAF Watton for 3 years, and during that period at Watton, he was promoted to sergeant. And it was at RAF Watton where he had a very strange dream, which happened soon after his arrival at Watton in 1965, as he explains. I dreamt one night that I was standing in the middle of a virtually empty hangar, when a sergeant came through the open hangar doors, walked straight up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Sid Twining, just posted in. Where's the squadron admin office?" I directed him to it. I told my wife the following morning about the dream, as the name was unusual and was so clear. Sergeant Hindley thought no more about his dream, and it was put out of his mind. After his tour of duty, he was posted to Royal Air Force Scampton in Lincolnshire, where he worked on the Blue Steel missiles fitted to the Avro Vulcan bombers. In 1969, Sergeant Hindley was posted to RAF Wattisham in Suffolk, to Number 29 Squadron, who were equipped with the English Electric Lightning jet fighter, and it was his task to service the Lightnings. Don't need the comma, Bruce. Never mind. One day I was standing in the hangar when I saw a sergeant walking towards me. I somehow knew what he was going to say to me, and sure enough, he did. Hi, I'm Sid Twining, just posted in. Where's the squadron admin office? It was a most peculiar feeling. What a strange dream that came true 5 years later. Peter Hindley later told Sid Twining what had happened, and they became good friends. Sergeant Peter Hindley came out of the Royal Air Force in 1973 after serving 15 years, and today he lives in Warrington in Cheshire. And since his experiences whilst in the Royal Air Force, he said, "Since this experience, I have been fascinated by deserted airfields and what tales they harbour. These old, silent airfields harbour many strange and eerie secrets, but none stranger than Sid Twining, I presume." I'm just going to find a nice short one to end with tonight. Yeah, that'll do. If I mark it, I know we've read it. Oh, lovely. Sound. The Haunted Road. And from the phantom cyclist to the phantom roadside figure, which was sighted not far from High Wycombe in Buckinghamshire. High Wycombe was the home of Bomber Command during the Second World War. The area was chosen because of its remoteness. It was at High Wycombe that Air Marshal Sir Arthur T. Harris took over as Commander-in-Chief of Bomber Command on the 3rd of February 1942. From High Wycombe, Butcher Harris, I get the feeling Bruce Barrymore Halpenny does not like Bomber Harris. Yeah, I think this is borne out here. From High Wycombe, Butcher Harris hatched his plots to destroy the industrial might of Germany, and in the process kill thousands of innocent civilians with his needless bombing of non-strategic targets. By the end of the Second World War, Bomber Command had dropped over 2 million high-explosive bombs and 83 million incendiaries, equal to one bomb dropped every 2 seconds throughout the days and nights of the war. The cost in terms of life was high. Some 47,000 aircrew were killed, many just blasted out of the skies, and it was Butcher Harris at High Wycombe who gave the orders. One night in 1971, Steve Bond and his wife were driving home to their house in High Wycombe along the main A404 road from Amersham at about 15 minutes past midnight. Along this section of the road there are wide grass verges on either side, and the long sweeping curves and good straight stretches make it a fast road. The night was cold and clear, with not much traffic about, as Steve Bond explains. There was not much traffic about, so I was able to drive on full beam headlights. As we negotiated one of the curves, I could see for several hundred yards ahead that the road was empty. In an instant, a figure appeared standing in the side of the road, half facing towards us. The appearance was so sudden that I had to swerve to avoid it. There was absolutely no cover from behind which the figure could have appeared. In the couple of seconds during which it was in full view of my headlights, it could be seen to be a figure of a stocky man in what I would describe as a sports jacket. His head was completely wrapped in bandages, but he had no face at all, just a sort of greyness. There was a car some short distance behind me, and I checked my mirror to see if he too pulled out. He did not, and despite being on a curve, the figure was not, as I would have expected, silhouetted. Neither of us spoke for some time until I asked my wife if she had seen anything. We subsequently described the same thing exactly, but were too nervous to go back for a second look. Oh, it's nice. Oh, lovely. So, what had Steve Bond and his wife seen that January morning? Was it one of Butcher Harris's faceless crews come back to haunt the area around High Wycombe? So many brave aircrew needlessly died during the Second World War, and this was made clear in other chapters in the Ghost Station series. Over the years, there have been many phantom sightings on that stretch of road near High Wycombe. The incident with Stephen Bond and his wife took place about halfway between Amersham and High Wycombe, just before the B474 turning to Beaconsfield. Another eerie incident that happened on that stretch of haunted road was indeed very chilling. The brother-in-law of Steve Bond was following a car along the A404 road, along that same piece of road, when he noticed that the car in front appeared to have an injured person slumped in the back. The driver frequently looked over his shoulder anxiously to check his passenger. They were heading towards High Wycombe and, concerned at what he had seen, asked at the hospital in High Wycombe about the patient recently admitted, only to be told no one had been admitted. Right, that's it for tonight. Nearly an hour and a half. Goodness me, you've had your money's worth, folks. So, Slingsbury Library. Delicious. Oh. Deliciouser. Derp is woken up. So, that's it for tonight. Cracking book, this. Fingers crossed, we'll be back for Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday. Goodness me, Derp, Friday already? Where did the week go? Yeah, so fingers crossed, we'll be back for Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday, as nature intended. Until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? All the beer burps again. What else am I going to do on a Wednesday evening in the beginning of August than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head drink ghost stories and read alcohol? Come on, you can do better. I can't. I am trapped in this tragic existence, but you can. Anyway, until the next time, as ever, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.